Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Written Page Podcast. My name is Anton Garcia Fernandez, coming to you from the small town of Martin, Tennessee. And you can watch and listen to this conversation we're going to have on this episode of the Written Page on my YouTube channel, Anton GF. And today we have a very special guest. I've been wanting to talk to her for a while, and her name is Cynthia Harmony, and she has a background in teaching, a background in education, and she has written a book that I absolutely love. My daughter does as well. The book is called Mi Ciudad Sings, so Mi Ciudad Canta, and she is originally from Mexico City, but she spent some time in Spain studying at the Universidad Complutense in Madrid. Like I said, she has a background in pedagogy and teaching, and she has written this book that has been published by Penguin Random House not too long ago. And in it, she collaborates with illustrator Teresa Martinez, also from the beautiful country of Mexico. She's in Tucson, Arizona right now, joining us from there. Welcome to the Written Page, Cynthia Harmony, and thank you for being here.
Hi, Anton. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here talking a little bit more about this book, Mi Ciudad Sings.
Now, I love your name, Cynthia Harmony. Is that a pen name or is that really your name and last name?
That is my real name. Yes, that's my married name. My name was Cynthia Torres Moguel, because in Mexico we used two surnames, so last names. And then, yes, when I got married, I switched it to Harmony.
Well, it really works very well, especially in a book that has so much to do with rhythm and music and harmony and community and all of that. So, but I'm wondering, you were born in Mexico City, in El DF, as they say over there in Mexico. And what are your earliest memories that are related to reading and that are related to literature? How do you remember your childhood in Mexico?
Yes, it was really nice. I remember, it used to be called DF. Now it's Ciudad de Mexico officially. So during my childhood, it was DF. We were Chilangos. That's what they call the people that are from Mexico City. And it was really good memories. Reading, I was very fortunate because in the city it's more common to have immersion schools, bilingual schools. So I attended one since kindergarten. So I started reading both in Spanish and English from elementary school. And then we did something when we were kids around that age. It was very common to do book reports. So would you pick a book that you liked and then present it and write something about it? And I really enjoyed that part. I think those are my earlier memories of that. And picking short stories in English, and then it could be anything you wanted, which was good. And then I even got to pick like ghost stories or fun stuff like that. So those were cool. I also remember my mom kept books from when she was a kid. So she had these it was a Grimm Brothers fairy tale book that she liked. And I remember the texture of the pages. It was just so old, but it was just, and the smell, and the tales were just so out of the ordinary. It was really interesting. So I think from that moment, I just started getting really interested in books and stories.
And I can see, you live in the U.S. now, but you grew up in a Spanish-speaking country. Were you always drawn to English from a very early age? How did that happen?
So I learned English young, as I went to bilingual, English immersion schools all the way, from elementary school all the way to high school. And then college, I attended Mexico City as well. I spent a year in Ohio. And then I did another exchange program in Spain before my master's, and I was in Salamanca, which was a wonderful experience. But yeah, I think it was just something we did a lot in school. I was just really used to it. I wasn't drawn to writing in English more than than Spanish in the beginning. But that's just when I moved here, when I moved to Arizona, I knew that I wanted to publish here. So I started just writing in English, the first drafts in English instead of Spanish, and it was just like a natural step. It wasn't so hard.
How important was the experience of studying abroad for you? Because I know for me, as the reason why I live in the U.S. Is because I was a student in a study abroad program here in the United States, and I decided to come back full time, so to speak. I wonder your time in Spain as a study abroad student. How important was that for you?
It was a really wonderful experience. I would recommend it to everybody. Like, if you get to do that, if you get to go experience a different culture, and I think the fun part about Spain, especially during college and then master's, it was also good. But in college, it was more like the meeting students from all over Europe that were there at that time. So you get this experience of not just that country where you're living in, but like probably more students that are there, foreign students, and yeah, just the contact with different cultures with them. I got to travel actually and go visit their families. So it was a wonderful opportunity that just opens up your mind and your horizons. Basically, you can just know that you can go and pursue different things, and yeah.
And then you mentioned that you went back to Spain for your master's, and you studied education in Madrid at the Complutense, one of the most important universities in Spain, and you also earned a master's degree there. You wrote several textbooks or participated in the creation of textbooks, and I wonder how did the academic research that you carried out, how did that influence your writing now that you are writing books of fiction?
So I do write books of fiction. I also write nonfiction. I'm actually working on a nonfiction picture book right now, which I'm really excited. But I also published educational books, which were textbooks. So having that experience, the academic experience of like research, I find that was really important. It really stayed with me. It's just like a method that you carry with you, and you know how to approach certain topics, how to research, I guess, also correctly, like with the right sources. So it's really important even like for fiction, like for this book, Mi Ciudad Sings, it's a fiction book based on a real event. So it also had research about what really happened in 2017. It has a lot of my memories and my experience in the city from when I was a kid, living through one of the biggest earthquakes in Mexico City. That was in 1985. But it also was very specific to what happened in 2017, which was when people really just came together, and it was like all over in social media, in newspapers, everywhere. It was just inspirational. So I just wanted to follow all these stories that happened during that time. So having that experience, like writing dissertations and doing academic research, I find that it's like a foundation, like a really good thing to have.
Yeah, I like that because you have all the different theories and the theoretical approach to things, but you also find a way to put that to work, so to speak, and to actually relate all of those let's say theoretical, more philosophical ideas in some cases to the real world. Like, there is not necessarily a disconnect between studying education and then actually being in the classroom and teaching or writing. So I think that's an interesting thing. Is that something that you think about very much when you write, or not really?
I do think about the reader like constantly when I'm writing. So if I'm writing for a specific age, I do wanna and that's extremely helpful for me, having like I have a bachelor's in psychology and then the education part. So knowing more about development of children and specific and what's interesting and what they can grasp. I think it's extremely useful for me.
Mhm. Yeah, and was there any moment, a specific moment that you remember when you decided that you wanted to become a writer? Or is this something that has always been with you, since you've been always interested in books from a very early age, which is something I share with you really as well, because even though I'm not a writer, although I do teach literature at the university, but I've always been surrounded by books, and all my memories have to do with books and music and stuff like that. But was there a specific moment when you realized that this is what you wanted to do, or is it that something you've always known?
I when I was a kid, I didn't. It wasn't a goal. It wasn't something that I considered being a writer. Um, but it kind of sort of happened like along the way. It happened. I do remember one specific moment, and this was in Salamanca. I was just talking about, and it was during college still. That it was one of my favorite professors. I adored that class because it was a class that was about how we learn, like how children, but also how just the process of learning and how we could support teachers or experts, basically content experts on any kind of subject to teach better. I absolutely love that class. And so my professor had a textbook and we were using that in class. And I think that was the first thing that happened to me, where we were using the textbook of the professor. And I absolutely love that. I was just like, oh my God, it makes so much sense. And because he knows exactly what he's talking about. And then we're reading it and we can follow. And I realized like, hey, maybe I can do this. I don't think I've ever thought about it before until that specific time. And it became like something that I was aware of, and a goal that I had for my master's. And then I did publish. So my first publication was textbooks. Mm-hmm. So it was something in Mexico, because I realized something that, well, it's research. I'm doing all this research, and then I can actually use it for students. Mm-hmm. So that was the first. And then I knew, while I was in my master's in Madrid, I realized I just went to bookstores, and all the time it's just these amazing bookstores everywhere. And I just fell in love with the children's books again. I would just grab it just for myself to enjoy the art and everything. And I realized yes, I also want to include these fiction writing at some point in my life. I didn't do it right away, because when I went back to Mexico, I started working in museums first, but then it just sort of eventually happened. And then it was a goal that I wanted to pursue.
Well, you mentioned before that Mi Ciudad Sings is a book. It is your first picture book that you have written, if I'm not mistaken. And I one thing that I was wondering, because you were talking about how this book is based on memories that you have from the time when you were a kid, 1985, and those the earthquake in Mexico City, and some of these experiences that you've had. Then there was another earthquake that came years later. So I'm wondering, I know it's based on your own experiences, and to a certain extent, or to a great extent, but how did the idea for Mi Ciudad Sings come about? When did you decide you wanted to write a book about this? Why did you want to write a book about this? And how did the project begin?
Yes, so sometimes I think the process for writing, it just goes from an idea, and then you write a draft, and then you revise. And maybe you have a bunch of ideas, and then you decide, okay, I'm going to go with this one. But sometimes, and it's happened for this book, and then my next project, my next picture book, it was sort of the same. It was just something, an event that actually took place that inspired me, something that happened just it just revived a bunch of memories, a bunch of ideas, and I was really moved with what happened. I followed everything. I was in Arizona at that time, but my mom was living in the city. My sister was working with helping with the resources and volunteers and all that stuff. And I had a lot of friends, psychologists in the city offering services. So I was very much involved in what was going on. And and really inspired with the generosity. So I just felt like I just had this impulse. I want to write about this because it's an opportunity. Well, like a community in Latin America normally is not portrayed in a positive light, and this was like an example, like worldwide of like generosity and kindness and hope. So it was an idea that I really wanted to explore. So after all these, and I was, it was a lot of moments, and then actually there's one moment in the book where people sing this song, Canta y no llores, and that actually happened. And so just watching the videos and just being really moved by it, I just wanted to write it. So this earthquake happened in 2017. Pretty soon after that, I wrote the first draft. So in 2018, I was like revising this manuscript in a conference, and then got my agent, and then we revised so that it could go on submission.
Now, the book is really interesting for several reasons. Of course, one of them is what you're describing, how all these experiences and everything that you had access to in the first person, but also reading about the response of people to the earthquake and to something, tragic like that. The way that you were able to carve out of that this beautiful text for this book. Then there's also the wonderful illustrations by Teresa Martinez. Tell us a little bit more, if you can, about the process of writing the book, and also what your interactions with Teresa were like. Was this a friend of yours? Was this somebody you knew? If not, how did you click with her? And how important is it to have a close relationship, working or personal relationship with an illustrator that you're working with?
Okay, so this is a question I get really often about the illustrators. Like, how did that happen? Did you choose her? How? So normally, what happens with picture books? Yes, I would. Normally, it's just that the publisher chooses the illustrator. So they will. When they first bought this story, and my editor said, like, like, we like it, and then we want someone either from Latin America or Mexico to illustrate it. So we're going to look for that. And I was like, oh, great. That's wonderful. Makes sense. And then they tend to share a list of people, like potential illustrators, and then get your feedback, and then check with them, because they also have these, like, they're super busy. They have these schedules that are filled for years. So you have to check if they can take the project in the end. So I don't remember how, if they check with someone else, but she was an option. And from the beginning, I thought, yeah, that'll be great. She actually lives in Mexico, so that's also wonderful. And she was able to do it with her schedule, so that worked out good. The team normally doesn't encourage communication with the illustrator, because they want to have each person have their own, like, creative process. Mm-hmm. So it's a very much a separate thing. So I did not have any contact with Teresa for the whole, the development stage. I did get to have, like, all my ideas, and I shared pictures, because this was a real event. So I shared pictures and also real places with my editor. So she was my contact there. And then the art director is Teresa's contact. So that's how they share information. And they do share also the first drafts from when the illustrator has things ready. And if you have, some comments, then you can, or suggestions, you can share those with the team again. So again, no communication yet. And then towards when the book was ready, yes, I still didn't. So yeah, there was no communication, but when the book was ready and I wanted Teresa to be part of my unboxing video, I messaged her directly through social media, and I was like, oh, hi, like, introduce myself. It's like, I if you want to share a picture with me, because I would love to have it, like, as a team. And she was lovely, and I'm so glad that we got that moment to actually connect. And then after the book came out, then yeah, so that we have these interactions through, just celebrating the book. But it is very much a separate process, which I find weird because I used to work in museums where you work hand in hand with the designer, and
Yeah.
so it's not the same here.
For future picture books, do you feel like you would like to maybe be able to work more in the way that you used to work with people at the museums, or does this kind of teamwork that's maybe not as close, does it still work for you?
I would love to. I think it makes a lot of sense for me because I've done it before, and I do see their point where they don't want to have like a person just being like in charge of this and telling the other person, hey, don't do this or whatever. So I understand why they want to keep it separate, but I also feel like it would be a more of a collaboration. Like I think so that would be great. Actually, for the second book that's coming out, I've already had contact with the illustrator, who I also think is wonderful, before I saw the first drafts. So that's been different, from the beginning. So hopefully, yeah, that could. I think that changes. It may be depending on the publisher and the team that you get, but I feel like, yeah, that would be nice.
One thing that I'm interested in about the book is the bilingual aspect of the book, because I read I have not really gotten my hands on the Spanish translation of it or the Spanish version of it, but I have read the English version of it, and of course there are a lot of words in Spanish, originally in Spanish, and there's a glossary at the end, and I like this mixture of languages because when you think of the interaction between English and Spanish in the U.S., there are many parts of this country where that actually happens. Where you are using English and you throw words in Spanish and vice versa and that kind of thing. So I'm sure you get this question all the time. But did you write the book originally in English? Did you write it in Spanish? Did you write it in both? Did you have an idea to write it in English and then translate it into Spanish? How did that work, and why is it that the English version of this book includes so many words in Spanish?
Yes, it's almost like I guess some people might consider bilingual the English edition, right? Because it has a lot of Spanish. It just I think I've written other things that have a lot less Spanish words, although I always include something because it's just how my brain is working. And like you said, like in real life, that's also how I talk with my husband or with my kids. And then
it's also the way I talk to my wife, and that's, because my wife is from the US and I was born originally in Spain. And so when we have a daughter and, we're around the house, we kind of switch back and forth and we just use, English and Spanish at the same time. And so, I kind of felt myself a little bit reflected in the book when I was reading it, because, that happens to me all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And it just felt, because this book, I will show you the Spanish edition right here. Okay. So because it's set in Mexico City, it just would be, I just found it really strange to just translate like words that were very, very like local and regional, like the food esquite, like there's no way to translate that unless you explain in like a whole sentence, well, it's just the whole explanation of what it is. And then because I write in a lyrical way, which it would not work. So I just thought, well, let's just do that. And then for like the people that really like know Spanish, and they could have the glossary at the end for like additional help. But because it's illustrated, it's really like, I find that it's really easy to navigate through it, even if you know like little or no Spanish.
Now, I assume that you did translate into Spanish. You have, you also have done some work as a translator. How important do you think that work, or your role as a translator, how important is that for the books that you write? Do you think there's that has any sort of impact in any way in your writing in English? The fact that you did not grow up necessarily speaking English from the cradle, so to speak, but that English is such an important part of your life as well, since now you live in the U.S.
Yes, and I think that's why you find so many Spanish words in the English version. But it also, like when I write for the translation for this book, I think for most picture books, I write the English version first and then the Spanish, and then translate into Spanish. And then sometimes after I'm done with the Spanish edition, I realize like, hey, I normally go back to the English and change a few things, because when you're writing in Spanish, you find like new things, like maybe more, details, or maybe more specific things that you want to add to the story, or that are more lyrical or something. So I would go back to the English and maybe polish or change a few things. So it is a process that is very helpful, at least for me, to translate the picture books, because it kind of like also makes the other version stronger in the end.
And when you write a children's book, you mentioned picture books like this one, Mi Ciudad Sings, and now you're working on, or you have worked on another one that's coming out. How do you approach the writing of these books? What aspects are most important to you when you are creating the text for these books that will then also be illustrated?
So yeah, while you're drafting, it is like the first one I've already mentioned is like, I do think of the reader and the age and what's interesting, what the development stage of the child or teen or whatever, and then think about the draft. There's so many. When you're revising, you can revise in so many different ways, like what you're trying to say, the style, because I want it to be lyrical. So I'm also paying attention to the sound of the words, how they sound together in a sentence, or how they sound together in a spread as well. And then how you want the page turn. So that's pacing. So there's so many different little aspects that you revise to make it better, so that it's as a whole, it just like flows. It just feels like it's flowing, and there's no added space or added words that maybe they don't need to be there, especially for picture books. It has to be like really short and exactly what you need, taking the space, because you don't want to take space from the art as well. So it also needs to be very visual. So what you're talking in the text, it needs to evoke a certain emotion or an image, so that illustrator can collaborate from there and then take it to a different level.
Mm-hmm.
Are you thinking about? Yep. Yeah,
no, I please go ahead.
So you're thinking also about that, the visual aspect of your text, of your draft, and if it's, for me, if it's lyrical, the sounds, how it connects, if there's a thread like that goes from beginning to the end, and if it's appropriate for the age as well, and if there's a message at all that well, I don't want it to be didactic. Like it has to be really subtle, something that the reader can decide afterwards and can have like more conversations.
But what I was going to say is that when you talk about the text being visual in a way, as you're writing the text for a book like this, do you already have in mind more or less what you would like the image to look like?
Yes, I think as a picture book author, we tend to imagine like a little bit and then sometimes if it's not clear, this is a whole debate for art notes, like if you can include them or not, and some editors like them, some don't, but you can like it, and then you have a very specific idea of what you want the art to be in some spreads, and then you can add the art note like to suggest like this is what I'm talking about here, because you tend to have that imagery also in your head while you're writing, and then sometimes, most of the time, I think is the illustrators are really talented, they just take it beyond what you expected it to be like. Normally it's better, and then they just add layers to it, but yes, you do have like an idea of what you want.
I have, from my perspective, this is a, very successful picture book because it grabs you from the beginning. The story is interesting. It's got lots of different nuances. There's a lot you can read into it. The uh, drawings, I think, fit really well with the text. But I was wondering, from your perspective, how would you define what a successful picture book is to you? When you see a picture book that you're really happy with, that you really enjoy, well, what does that look like to you?
That's a really good question because I think that changes for every reader and it's very subjective. Some people really connect with certain things, and some people are just completely different things. But I think that if a book is valuable, basically it's just if a reader connected. If there's a reader that really connected with your words or with the art, then there's value in that in there. Like you spoke to that reader at some level. It offered comfort. It was maybe an invitation to think about a certain topic. If it's memorable, if it's fun or funny, because humor is also really important for kids. It's something that, it's something interesting. It's like if it's nonfiction, if it's giving new information, and then basically something that's not going to be easily forgotten, something that will stay with the reader a little longer, I think, has a lot of value. And also, like particularly for me, like if it helps represent the world as diverse as it really is, then it has a lot of value because we don't get that very often.
You mentioned before that one of the things that you think about as you're writing the text is whether what you're writing is age appropriate. Do you think that it is possible to write for kids, to write children's literature or young adults literature about any topic, or are there is it possible to write about difficult topics for kids, difficult topics like what you are tackling here? And when you do that, how do you do that? How in what ways can you tackle a topic that is difficult for a child in a way that will be successful and effective?
Yes, I think it is possible, and it actually serves a purpose. It's actually benefits the reader of any age if there's books of all these different topics. And I was in a panel a few months ago. We're talking about that the difficult topics, and someone was saying, well, it's not so much it's difficult or tough topics. It's more like it's essential because those are part of life at any age. Like it doesn't matter what age you are, you will experience pandemics and earthquakes and any other sort of challenge. So there are there, and if you ignore them, maybe you're taking away the opportunity. If you ignore those essential topics, you're taking away the opportunity for kids and for teens to see that that character going through it, and maybe take away some of their learning. So, and then maybe also provide comfort if needed. So I think the topics are there for all ages. There are some fantastic picture books like that are about slavery, about many different like really tough essential topics. And the way to approach them, I guess, is the interesting and the tricky way to really do it well. You have to be really to consider how kids that age are dealing with it, like how they think about it, how they approach it, the parts that they're concerned about. Because maybe as an adult, for an earthquake or a pandemic, we would be concerned about certain things. As a teen, different things, and as a kid, completely different things. It's about their life, right? What and how this impacts their life. So I think if you consider that, and then just I think it's also for all kid lit, like books that are for kids, you have to bring hope always when you're dealing with this kind of books. So So you just know that you're going to bring that aspect of it and do it in a way that's appropriate for their age.
Do you think it is difficult? Do you think it is challenging for an adult to actually put himself or herself in a kid's shoes when it comes to writing for them? Is that something that you find difficult to do, or does your background in psychology and education help?
I think my background helps. Sometimes it is hard to do. It's for grown-ups to remember what it was like at that age, where it was like, what it was like to be 6, what your concerns were when you were 6, your thought process. So we forget a lot, but I think also like that's like my psychology background helps, but also just being in contact with kids is, I think, what helps the most. Just constantly talking with my kids and just being really interested and paying attention to their conversations and what they're interested, how they talk, the things that are interesting to them.
I suppose that having your own kids helps in a different way too.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, kids. If you're a teacher and you're in contact with kids, that'd be great. But yeah, I do it with my own kids all the time, and then I actually read to them. It's like, do you understand what I'm trying to say here? Is it like you don't like? Yeah. So all the time I'm trying to connect more with those ages.
I know that having grown up in Mexico City and speaking Spanish was an important thing when it came to writing this book in particular, Mi Ciudad Sings, or Mi Ciudad Canta. But I'm wondering, to what extent does your personal experience of growing up in Mexico shape your writing as a whole? Not just in the case of this book, but just in general.
So like I was saying in the beginning, yeah, I feel like I was really lucky because I had access to really good education, but also because I had access to the, cultural offerings, just so many things, like especially in the bigger cities. I think we have access to, there's like 150 museums in Mexico City. And then there's, our roots, all the history, and you have direct access to that as well. You go to temples, they're not far, they're right there. You go, you can explore things like hands-on kind of learning. So that theater, do music, like we're saying, like music concerts that they're happening all the time, and then just being in contact with all that is just really left a mark in me. And I'm just so interested in art, in books, in all of those messages, like yes, so sharing a message so that you can connect with readers through art. So yeah.
Cynthia, your book is written in English with a lot of Spanish words. There's also a version in Spanish. So for the final part of the interview, if you don't mind, I would love to flip the switch and switch to Spanish and to finish the interview, if you would like, in Spanish, in the language of your childhood, and it's language we shared, because obviously I was born in Spain. And so if you're okay with it, the last couple of questions I'd like to ask in Spanish, and we can have a little bit of a conversation in Spanish. Is that okay?
Claro, me encantaría.
Pues una pregunta tiene que ver con la música. Yo creo que la música es muy importante en el libro que has escrito, en Mi Ciudad Canta. Y me pregunto qué importancia tiene la música en tu vida, en tu juventud, en tu infancia y, por supuesto, en el libro.
En el libro fue algo que sí fue una decisión consciente, fue completamente intencional incluir la música. Es como una metáfora de la ciudad, del amor a la ciudad. Es todos los sonidos que son la rutina, que son habituales cuando vives en una ciudad. Y cuando vives en ella quizás ya ni los notas, pero como yo, cuando dejas tu país, y recuerdas, esos tienen como una carga emocional, son tus memorias y, y es pues, el amor por tu ciudad, lo que extrañas, y lo que recuerdas. Entonces eso quería incluirlo en la historia, que fuera parte de la música, como música para los oídos de la niña, del personaje principal, cuando camina con Pancho. Y entonces como viene después un silencio donde todo cambia y luego se restablece ese ritmo. Entonces, esa parte de la música en la ciudad es completamente eso, como la metáfora del amor a mi ciudad y de todo lo que recuerdo.
Lo pregunto porque tenemos la música, como música hay un momento en el que se canta esa canción de Canta y no llores
Sí,
y se habla un poco de la música que se escucha en la radio, en el mercado y cosas así,
sí,
pero también hay como una especie de ritmo de música que es como los sonidos, ¿no? Que uno escucha a su alrededor en la ciudad y que de alguna manera pues también se unen para crear como una especie de banda sonora pues de la vida de las personas. Hay mucha onomatopeya, hay mucho sonido en este libro, hay mucho ritmo y creo que eso es algo que está hecho pues muy bien. Una de las cosas que más me han atraído del libro es precisamente eso. ¿Esta era una intención desde el principio en el libro? ¿Es algo que fue pues ocurriendo a medida que lo ibas escribiendo?
sí, fue intencional y porque desde el principio lo que comentábamos era un tema que yo quería abordarlo para esta edad, para niños de 4 a 8 años, de 3 a 9, no sé, es más o menos esa edad. Entonces tenía que ser algo que a pesar de que hubiera un evento importante y difícil en el libro, que fuera algo que lo pudieran relacionar con algo positivo. Y entonces la música que no termina, la música que continúa, el cantar para poder sentir esperanza, para conectar con los demás, es parte esencial de la cultura y entonces era algo que sí quería incluir y no fue fácil porque era también las palabras, los sonidos, quería que fueran también, que fuera toda la experiencia, el leer ese libro, que tuvieras esa experiencia como del ritmo. Entonces se requirió mucho y revisarlo muchas veces, pero sí fue desde el principio algo que quería incluir como la canción de la ciudad, que fue la canción que cantaron el Canta y no llores, como para dar ese ánimo.
En ese sentido, ¿fue difícil traducir el libro al español para mantener ese ritmo, ese sonido, o es algo que ocurrió de forma natural en la traducción?
No fue, sí, no fue tan difícil. Creo que en el siguiente libro, que tiene mucho, tiene también unos sonidos y tiene unas decisiones muy específicas en inglés, fue más difícil la traducción. Este no tanto, no lo sentí tanto para mí porque era, otra vez, siento que no fue tan difícil este libro porque es algo que es súper, es parte de mí, entonces lo podía hacer y además quería que sonara, que el español fuera, eso también es algo que cuando comentábamos de la traducción, yo quería que el español fuera de México, el español que escuchas, que no es de otros países, que a veces en libros, en México tenemos muchos libros traducidos, pero no son para la región. Entonces muchas veces la gente no quiere o siente que no, como que no se identifica fácilmente. Entonces yo quería que este libro tuviera ese español que es el nuestro, eh, porque es de la Ciudad de México. Entonces sí era importante para mí traducirlo, que yo misma traducirlo para que sonara de esa manera, sonara de la forma como es normal para mí,
Ujú.
el haber crecido ahí y como honrar ese, esa cultura y ese lenguaje muy específico de esa región.
El libro habla de un sentimiento de comunidad, de una unidad ante la adversidad para salir adelante cuando la tragedia golpea la vida diaria y cambia en un momento lo que nosotros estamos acostumbrados a ver, a vivir, ¿no? Que cambia culpa de este desastre natural. Y una cosa que me parece interesante es que se habla de este sentimiento de comunidad en este momento de adversidad, de la respuesta a esa adversidad. Y yo me pregunto, sin querer tampoco generalizar demasiado, si piensas que hay algo que sea específicamente mexicano de la manera de responder a estas adversidades. Es decir, esto tiene algo que ver con la manera en la que en general podemos hablar de las personas mexicanas. ¿Responden de una manera diferente o piensas que esto es algo más bien universal?
Creo que puede ser universal, pero yo creo que sí hay algo específico en mi experiencia, al menos. Creo que sí es una calidez y que creo que caracteriza a los mexicanos como dentro del sentido de turismo, cuando la gente piensa en que voy a ir de vacaciones a México, sabe que va a recibir este tipo de bienvenida, que va a ser, probablemente va a ser algo amigable, va a ser cálido, va a ser, creo que esa cultura, sí, de comunidad. Es muy importante para nosotros las fiestas, estar en contacto con los amigos, tener esa comunicación, mucho más que otras culturas. Siento que es una cultura más hacia lo colectivo, ¿no? No es tan competitiva como varias otras, entonces sí tendemos a darle valor al grupo y creo que eso se ve digo, en la cultura, tal vez como somos reconocidos en algunos países o cierta reputación que podríamos tener. Tal vez esto, no sé, tal vez más en el pasado, que es algo cuando yo vivía en México que creo que era algo muy común. No sé si ahora continúa, pero creo que sí puede ser algo muy que caracteriza a los mexicanos, el darse ese tipo de apoyo desde una forma muy cálida, ¿no? De contacto.
¿Qué te gustaría que los lectores y lectoras, especialmente los angloparlantes, sacasen en limpio de este libro? ¿Qué te gustaría que aprendiesen, que interiorizasen después de la lectura? Y supongo que no solamente en una ocasión, sino en varias ocasiones, porque es un libro que se puede leer con cierta rapidez y se puede disfrutar. ¿Qué te gustaría que interiorizasen lectores pues, cuya lengua no es el español, sino el inglés, al leer la versión en inglés de este libro?
Yo creo que eso, que hay mucho valor en las culturas latinoamericanas. Este libro es específico de México, pero siento que se puede generalizar hacia Latinoamérica, que estamos normalmente muchos estereotipos. Últimamente, en estos últimos, no sé, década, México también ha tenido como la reputación, la imagen que tiene la gente de México es negativo y lo que se presenta en las noticias constantemente. Entonces, toda esta imagen negativa de toda una cultura que es riquísima, entonces se reduce. Entonces, lo que quisiera es eso, presentar, que yo espero que pueda hacer con todos mis libros, presentar ese valor nuevamente, ¿no? Que la gente pueda darse cuenta del valor y de aparte conectar, o sea, de empatía, de poder conectar a otro nivel con esta cultura, aunque no sea tuya, a un nivel un poco más profundo. Y que eso espero, que mi deseo y mi intención es que no se olvide.
En los últimos 20 años en los que yo llevo viviendo en Tennessee, he visto la lengua española y la cultura hispana en general crecer enormemente en ciertas partes de los Estados Unidos, y supongo que tú habrás visto algo semejante durante tu tiempo aquí en los Estados Unidos. ¿Cómo ves este crecimiento de la lengua española y de las culturas? No voy a decir la cultura, sino más bien las culturas hispanas en este país. ¿Has visto algunos cambios? ¿Qué esperas que ocurra en un futuro con la lengua española, que cada vez yo creo que tiene más potencia en los Estados Unidos, pero que también, por supuesto, se va a encontrar con barreras para crecer muy evidentes, ¿no?
Claro, es un gran porcentaje de la población que habla español, entonces tiene muchísimo sentido que puedan encontrar y que tengan acceso a más servicios y productos que puedan ofrecer ese lenguaje. Yo sí veo que afortunadamente está creciendo, espero que siga el crecimiento. Por ejemplo, mis hijos van a una escuela de bilingüe, entonces no hay aunque estamos casi a la frontera con México, no hay muchas escuelas bilingües en esta zona, pero al menos hay algunas donde podemos tener ese acceso. Entonces, eso creo que o sea, lo que mi suegra que creció en esta zona, antes no había, o sea, no solamente no había en esas escuelas, sino se prohibía y se castigaba el uso del español. Entonces, que ahora haya en la oferta educativa el idioma español, pues es un gran avance. Entonces yo esperaría y tiene todo el sentido que siga creciendo.
Cuando te preguntaba antes en la parte en inglés sobre si piensas que se puede escribir sobre cualquier tema para niños y para jóvenes, pues con diferentes estrategias y diferentes contenidos y cosas así, te lo preguntaba sobre todo porque ha habido mucha controversia últimamente en los Estados Unidos con esta cuestión acerca de libros que deben o no deben estar en las bibliotecas y ciertos temas que se pueden tratar y no se pueden tratar dependiendo de ciertos guardianes de la moral y de la moralidad. ¿Cómo ves ese tema? ¿Te preocupa que haya tanta o que haya gente que no sé si es mucha, pero sí hace mucho ruido en cuanto a las cosas que deben estar o no deben estar en las bibliotecas? ¿Cómo ves ese tema que está bastante de actualidad en los Estados Unidos y me da la sensación de que lo va a estar también si no lo está ya en otros países?
Sí, sí preocupa un poco. No, no sé qué tanto debe de ser la alarma, porque como dices, no sabemos cuántas personas son, pero sí son, sí al menos hace mucho ruido sobre eso. Pero sí creo que para mí es como una señal de qué tanto poder tienen los libros y por qué debemos seguir en el mismo camino para abrir hacia la diversidad, para ofrecer más eh, libros donde los niños se puedan ver a sí mismos y también donde puedan tener contacto con cosas culturas, experiencias, ciudades. Por ejemplo, este libro que para niños que jamás han ido a la Ciudad de México y tal vez no van a ir, pueden tener la experiencia de cómo se ve la ciudad y cómo se siente la ciudad, cómo se escucha la ciudad, cómo es la gente de la ciudad. Entonces, el poder tener lo que se comenta muchísimo, las ventanas, las puertas, ¿no? The windows and the doors and the sliding doors. Es súper importante que los niños puedan tener ese reflejo, pero también puedan tener acceso a cosas distintas. Y los niños, y yo en esto incluiría también pues los educadores y los padres y no, todos los lectores, porque es necesario y es como un canal de empatía. Entonces creo que por eso hay tanta gente que está molesta y quiere controlar, porque, bueno, por sus propias agendas, pero creo que debemos seguir en este esfuerzo por crear historias auténticas y que representen el mundo como es, para honrar al mundo como es y a todas las personas que están en él.
¿Te parece que la literatura, la buena literatura infantil y juvenil es aquella que pueden leer los niños, pero que también pueden disfrutar los adultos?
Sí, especialmente estos libros, picture books, están hechos para que el adulto lo lea y lo comparta con los niños. Entonces, yo siento que sí tiene que tener diferentes niveles. Es un nivel donde el niño puede disfrutar y tiene otro nivel donde el adulto también puede conectar. Entonces, ese es como que el ideal y creo que también por eso es tan difícil este formato de lograr bien, porque quieres abarcar esas dos diferentes grupos y audiencias, ¿no? Entonces, sí.
Sí, estoy muy de acuerdo y creo que lo consigues con creces en este libro, Mi Ciudad Sings y Mi Ciudad Canta en la versión en español. Y para terminar la última pregunta, voy a volver a la lengua inglesa. Vamos a volver como al al principio, hacer un círculo y cerrarlo de forma lingüística, pues ahora con la última pregunta en inglés para cerrar este episodio de The Written Page. And of course, the question that I would like to ask you, since you've mentioned already before that you've been working on different things, some of which will be coming out, I suppose, fairly soon. What are the projects that you are working on that you can actually disclose some information about to our listeners here on The Written Page?
So yeah, my next picture book is coming out next year in 2023. It's called A Flicker of Hope, and it's published by Viking. It's going to be illustrated by Devon Holsworth. And it's a parallel story about a girl that waits for the monarch butterflies to bring her papa back home. So it's the parallel story of the monarchs and how they migrate to Canada, and then her papa also migrates north for work, and then she's expecting her dad and the monarchs back. So it was a hard structure, and it started as a poem, and then it got revised into a parallel structure, and it's inspired on the Mazawa community. It's an indigenous community that lives in that area in Mexico where the monarch reserve is. I also have a board book coming out in spring of next year. That's for younger, kids, for babies. That's from Barefoot Books. That's illustrated by Claudia Navarro. She's also a Mexican illustrator, and this is very sweet. It's called Our World Mexico. So it's one book per country. It's a series of books, and it's really interesting because they're Barefoot Books, but they wanted to hire an author and an illustrator from those particular countries so that it could actually and accurately represent those countries. So I think it's wonderful. I love to be a part of it, and it is also very, very sweet. That's what's coming. I have another, but that will be till 2024, a nonfiction book that I was talking about also, but that's not announced yet, so I can't say any more details. But I'm also excited to be working on a nonfiction. It's a little bit more of what we were talking about, like going back to my academic roots.
Yeah, so very quickly, because there's a couple of things that I just thought about as you were talking about these books are coming out. In what way would you say those books are somehow related to Mi Ciudad Sings, or are they books that depart completely from this one?
I think that they're completely different stories. The board book is set in Mexico as well. So that's because it wants to portray what a day in the life of a young kid in Mexico. And for me, that's my experience is Mexico City. So it will show a little bit again of Mexico City. I'm really excited about that. And then the other picture book is a completely different story and also different structure. And I think the only similarity is the lyrical language. Mm-hmm. Oh, the lyrical language, a few Spanish words in it as well. And I'm also very excited that it's going to have a Spanish edition, a simultaneous Spanish edition. So that's exciting.
I know you cannot disclose anything about the nonfiction book, but when you write about nonfiction, what topics do you usually like to tackle? Something to do with your studies, the stuff that you got a master's on, or are there other topics that you're interested in, even if you haven't written about them yet?
I'm very interested. Like I said, I think it's because of my background and my experiences as a kid growing up in Mexico City. I'm super interested in art. Art and architecture is a big thing. So biographies and anything that's related to that probably will come from Latin America is something that I would be interested in working on. And yeah, just something more about indigenous communities and something that's from Latin America, I think, and anything related with art. Also, anything related with taking care of the environment is also another topic that interests me.
And to finish a slightly personal question, it's not really personal, but in what ways, or if there are any, in what ways do you have kids here in the United States, and I wonder in what ways do you think the experience of growing up is different from them here in the United States from the experience that you had growing up in Mexico City?
So it is different. I think the only way that I'm trying to bring that bicultural aspect, they are bicultural because I talk to them in Spanish. I've had since they were babies, and we visit Mexico often, but it's something that I want to continue to do so that it's always something familiar to them. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the difference. Like I grew up in this environment and everything was completely familiar, and I had access to all these because I was in the city. And here we're not in the city, so they don't have access to all of the museums and art and everything that I did. But when we travel, that's what I try to bring in for them. Yeah.
Cynthia Harmony, the book is called Mi Ciudad Sings, Mi Ciudad Canta, both in English with Spanish words thrown in, of course, and in Spanish, published recently by Penguin Random House. She joined us from Tucson in the state of Arizona, but she was born in Mexico City. It really has been a pleasure to have you here on the written page. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. And of course, we hope to get to see you again sometime in the future when these projects that you have been working on come out. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for being our guest on the written page today.
Thank you. Had a wonderful time. Thank you for having me.
And I would like to recommend the book, Mi Ciudad Sings, Mi Ciudad Canta, published by Penguin Random House, to everybody out there who might be watching or listening. This has been a new episode of the Written Page podcast, Videocast in this case as well. My name is Anton Garcia Fernandez. Mine, and of course, Cynthia Harmony's as well, is the copyright of this video, which we recorded at the very end of the month of September 2022. Very soon you'll be able to watch and listen to this podcast on my YouTube channel, Anton GF. And I don't want to forget to mention that Cynthia Harmony has collaborated in this book with illustrator Teresa Martinez, Mexican-based Mexican illustrator, and also Mexico-based illustrator Teresa Martinez in this book. And very soon we'll be back with more guests talking about literature here on the written page. Again, my name is Anton Garcia Fernandez, signing off now from the city of Martin in the state of Tennessee in the United States of America. As always, thank you for listening. Any comments, make sure to leave underneath, and we will leave also some information about Cynthia so that you may know how to find the book and how to get in touch with her. Thanks again. Muchas gracias, Cynthia, y hasta muy pronto.